would now like to introduce Catherine Weber, who will be joining in a moment. Catherine Weber is from, in a way, down the street from Hopkinton as well, in Southborough, Massachusetts. And Catherine is a poet, and she also is a visual artist. She is a mixed media artist who works with encaustic photography, paper, and textiles, and predominantly focuses on natural materials and subject matter. And Catherine was raised in upstate New York and also lived in Indiana and Connecticut. And she earned a BA in communications from Emerson College and an MA in critical and creative thinking from the University of Massachusetts. Catherine has exhibited her visual art across the country in a number of different settings, including the Danforth Art Museum, the Saco Museum of Art in Maine, the Creative Arts Workshop in New Haven, Connecticut, the Art Complex Museum in Duxbury, and a gallery in Provincetown. And her work can be seen at Fountain Street Fine Art in Boston. Catherine also is past chair of the Southborough Center for the Arts in Southborough, and she is creative director of Art on the Trails, which is a public art and poetry program in Southborough, Massachusetts. And with that, I am hoping to see Catherine.
Hi, Cheryl.
There you are.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you fine. It is good to see you.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Yes, well, I know there is a lot percolating for you with all you do in the area of art for yourself, in creating as well as community art.
Yes.
And just wondering, how are things going for you in these days of being in quarantine where you are?
You know, in some ways I'm super grateful because my son is home and I can work from home with my full-time job. So I do feel lucky. A lot of people can't do that. So the other part is that Art on the Trails is maybe one of the only exhibits people might see this summer. And I'm so excited that we can do it.
Yes. Can you tell a little bit? I know you are the creative director of that and you're in the thick of that right now.
Yes.
And it's been how many years now that you got that started in Southborough?
It will be the 4th year this year.
Wow. Okay.
I know, it seems like it just started. We publish a book every year. So each year there's a book that has the poetry and the art in it. And
they're beautiful.
You know, I'm very lucky that the collaboration I have with Maurice Snell, who's the publisher of this book, and editor, along with Cynthia Franca from Hopkinton. They really do so much of this work. And Chelsea Bradway, my friend, takes all the professionally photographed, you know, all the artwork is photographed in it. So it's a really beautiful book. And I could not do it by myself. So I feel really lucky. So every year I come up with a theme for the project. The artwork is installed in the nature preserve at Beals Nature Preserve. It's Philip and Elaine Beals Preserve, given by the Beals family to the Open Land Foundation. The Southborough Open Land Foundation runs the property and asked me to do this 4 years ago. And it's slowly grown and it's become well funded by the Southborough Community Fund, along with some local cultural council funding. And we now, you know, we have professional signage, we have, we can pay a juror. This year, Hillary Zelson she administers all the public art in Cambridge, and she juried our work. So we have artists submit proposals and she reviews them based on the theme for the year. And this year's theme is Rising Up.
Oh, very good theme.
You know, when I came up with that, it was way before the pandemic. It was in some ways about our politics, but it was also about my own personal rising up right now because um, this, and many people know I lost my husband a year ago. And so I felt uh, like I needed to rise above,
Mhm.
and so I came up with that idea. And then when the pandemic hit and people were submitting their artwork, a lot of the work responded to the pandemic, which was really
Wow.
interesting.
So
Um,
for folks who don't know, when you're saying work, could you describe what that is placed on the trails?
yeah, so some of the work it's kind of interesting because some of the work exists as a sculpture. Um, for instance, this was done by elementary school kids in Southborough, and it was organized by the art school teacher there.
Oh, wow.
But then we've had things as diverse as a bed installed in the woods. I
I
don't know if you can
remember
see that,
that.
with complete with a chandelier and a nightstand. And then one of the fantastic other pieces in here was a woman named Anne Alexander, who actually did carvings in the trees.
Oh,
And
wow.
so in this case, these are permanent, um, living on, three of these were carved into trees.
Mhm,
Um, and so the diversity of the work is, it's fascinating and wonderful. So
mhm,
every year we get proposals. Some of the work, like I said, is already exists, and they just bring it in like a sculpture,
mhm,
but most of the work is site specific. So people will say, I chose this tree and I want to do this thing.
mhm.
Some of the interesting, kind of fascinating installations this year are a woman who studied landmines at Vietnam and is going to
Yeah.
recreate a landmine field out of
Mhm.
flowers. So instead of a landmine, it will be flowers.
Oh boy,
Um,
that's
there's
exciting.
there's amazing granite sculptures by Kevin Duffy of Arlington. Um, there's one woman who's going to put a face mask on a tree. Um, there's some really fascinating and creative work. And then this gets installed the first weekend in June. And normally we have an opening, but this year as everyone is, we're going to have to change things up. And um, we're going to live stream installation. So when the artists are in the woods installing their work, we will live stream them and record their statements, ask them to talk about their work. And so we can collect all those videos and create an experience for people to watch. If they can't see it live over the weekend, they'll be able to watch it at a later time.
It
So
sounds like a wonderful idea, a way to accommodate to what we're dealing with.
yeah,
So we'll look forward to that. So the installation is happening soon.
June 6th and the 7th.
All
Yeah.
right. Mm-hmm.
And because Beals Preserve is, perfect for social distancing,
Yeah.
people do walk through the woods all the time.
Mhm.
They can come by and see who's installing over the weekend and talk to the artists from the trail.
Oh,
So
yeah. That sounds like a special opportunity. And so this happens, and then there's a poetry component that follows.
right. So after the art is installed, we invite poets from, local poets, because the poets need to come and see the work.
Mhm.
And then they write ekphrastic poetry, which is poetry that's in response to art.
Mhm.
And so our editors choose poetry that goes with the art and puts together this book. And
Mhm.
the book then, at the end of the summer, usually late September, we have a reading. Of course, this year, I have no idea what September will bring,
Mhm.
but we sure hope we'll be able to get together. It would be nice to do that.
Right.
If not, we'll do something again that's more live streaming. But we will have our book again, and there's going to be a poetry juror who will choose a prize winner, just like Hillary Zelson will choose a prize winner of the art. And then the book will be published with all of it in it.
Wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, this you're doing an amazing job in
Yeah.
adapting this project, which I am sure takes so much work and time on your behalf as well as your team.
Yeah.
But it's, I know, as being a participant on the trail, how important it is for a community to see the the combined forces of visual art and poetry on the trail and enjoying nature at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, every day to me, it's a gift to be able to go there. And just today, my dog Lucy was chasing bullfrogs in the pond, and I was just so grateful that I have this place because
Yeah.
it's very it's very comforting, and so many people feel like, what would we do without it? You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think if there's one thing that hasn't changed is we can still go to Beals Preserve.
Yes.
So,
Oh, good news. And did you want to share a few poems from that the book
well,
that you have
you
there?
know, I can read let me see. I'll read the one that I wrote
Mm,
about Denise Johnson's class. Denise Johnson, like I said, is a middle school teacher and or elementary school teacher, and she got all 237 of her students to create this forever woven, and it's a it's a, a continuous twisted double helix.
uh-huh.
But
Wow.
I know Denise, and I've known her for a long time. We met when we were walking dogs in the woods, and um, I wrote this poem about her installation, her kids' installation. It's called 514 Hands.
Mm,
514 hands still growing while they weave together an endless band of colors, an act of understanding their mark on earth. This teacher weaving a story in their minds and hearts to notice the world around them and how we mark it with our breath,
mm.
our food, our water. A learning moment will be forever woven in their memories of the teacher who gave their hands and their hearts a voice.
Wow. That is a powerful poem, and to hear it now resonates as well in different ways. Was that written last year for the?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I bet that means a lot to the artist, the teacher who
Yes.
coordinated that.
Well,
As,
I have to say that for me, what we ask a poet to do is go in the woods and look at the work and
mm,
read about them and say what touches you,
mm,
makes you want to respond. And we get so many powerful poems, and this is another community that I feel very lucky to be amongst, are the poets of Wake Up and Smell the Poetry, and the poets from up at Linda Hoffman's Old Frog Pond Farm, and all of these poems, all these poets from this area come together for these different events and share poetry. And it's another way of just connecting with each other, sharing how we feel. I expect there are going to be a lot of pandemic poems this year.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's also very well attended, and not just by people who write or read poetry. In the group, to hear the poets read in the woods, it's just a very special event. So, is there anything you want folks to know before we change topics?
Yeah, so come down to Beals Preserve in Southborough on June 6th and 7th during the day, and see some of the artists installing. Um, and you can learn more about that on artonthetrails.com.
Okay. Mhm.
And we have a Facebook page as well. And if you want to write a poem, we are going to put the call out and open up the call on our website, and you then can submit your poem through our website and be considered for publication in our book.
Well, that's
So
a wonderful opportunity to
we'd love that.
offer folks out there. So I look forward to hearing more information about this, and we'll keep in touch from your notifications and website. I did want to, you are involved in a number of different creative endeavors in both poetry and visual arts. And Catherine, I know we have talked that this past year has been a very difficult one for you. Um, while you have been steering this art on the trails, but as you mentioned, that the passing of your husband, which is almost a year ago now, and I am so sorry again for that. But I have heard you in a few settings begin to share your story of dealing with his unexpected passing, and how, in a way, the grieving process has inspired some of the art projects you've become involved with in regard to poetry. And I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
I'd love to. Thank you. So, to tie in Beals Preserve, I spent many a summer day last summer sitting in an Adirondack chair at a pond in Beals Preserve, where I had launched a kayak onto the pond in honor of my husband's death. He died on June 1st, and I wanted to honor him in some way as part of the Art on the Trails experience. And so, with the help of friends, I launched this kayak and put a memorial up. And so I somehow found myself sitting in a chair looking at that kayak a lot this summer and typing poems into my phone and crying. And so I spent a lot of time and I wrote a lot of poems.
Mm.
And so much of it was my way of trying to process grief. So I have a whole collection of those poems, and trying to put together a manuscript that helps me process my sadness.
Yeah.
And also to help my son. Our son, he's 19, and the day my husband died was the day before my son's high school graduation. So it was a very traumatic time. So I've written, if you'd like, I can read a couple of these poems. And
Yes.
I'm trying to find ones that don't get me too emotional. There's a poem here called What I Keep. It wasn't perfect by a long shot. It was hard. It was also really, really good for a long time ago. The inside jokes, never to be understood by anyone else living, is pretty hard to take. The holding each other during the best and worst of it, the mutual pride in our beloved son, and the true pride in each other and our accomplishments. The planting of the roseberry bushes, the time you saved me from the ground nest of wasps, your holding our son for the first time, and the nights when I could reach for you. I knew you would always answer when I called, even when we were so angry and hurt with each other. Who's going to make the shrimp cakes now? What will happen when the wine fridge is empty? And am I now in charge of your missing dinners? I found a wine crib sheet of yours between the seats of your truck this morning. And I'm sorry I let Lucy get all muddy on the back seat. You would be pissed at the mess. I will clean it soon, I promise. But right now I'm busy crying at the pond because your kayak is not here. I put it back in the garage. I'm trying to figure out what to put away, what to keep. I keep love. I keep your love in my heart, in my head, and somehow I move ahead, lost but moving, wondering if I'm going to ever hear from you ever again. I'm listening, but it's only bullfrogs and cicadas filling my ears, and Lucy licking the tears from my cheeks to keep me company in my grief.
That's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
I had to do some things that I might not have wanted to do. I had to renovate my bathroom this summer, and out of nowhere, the contractor came and said, I need you to empty that closet in your bedroom because there's plumbing in there, and I need to get in that closet. And of course, the contractor did not know that closet was my husband's closet. He actually didn't even know that my husband had passed away. And so when he said, can you clean out that closet? It was like a stab, you know? And so these are the kinds of things that I might not have touched that closet for years, but within a few months, I had to empty it.
Mm.
And these were difficult moments. So if I could read another
Yes,
poem,
please.
it's called Five Bins and Four Drawers.
Mm.
5 bins and 4 drawers. I had to take your shirts off the hangers earlier than I was prepared to. The plumber needs to get in your closet. So I called Mary and she came to help. We filled 5 plastic bins with snap-on lids with the contents of your closet, your dress shirts, your slip-on shoes, the brown, black, and canvas baby blue. You took to these in the last few years. Pants and ties that haven't seen the outside in years, plus 4 bureau drawers crammed full of your underwear and a Ziploc bag with your prescription bottles. I keep your glasses and wallet on top in case you come back from the dead and need them. Or maybe your son will come home from college and want to touch the things that were yours and take something when he is ready. 5 plastic bins, 4 drawers in a bureau, books on the tall wooden shelves, vinyl records, baseball cards, the Indiana Jones hat you got in Montana in 1993. There are a few other things, like the 4¼ inch disc that was the beginnings of a novel you intended to write. There are the notes on your mother's investments. I sent them to her. Your father's wedding ring is in the top drawer since he died. Now what should I do with it? How can I look at it? It feels like an invasion, and yet it means nothing when you are gone from this earth. And the holes you had in your left elbow of your shirts, the way you had leaned on it all day at work, such a strange thing to leave behind, and yes, yet the most human of all.
Mm.
So, you know, this is the best I can do to get through.
Yeah.
And yet I started to transition in my grief. You know, one of my poems about how I started dreaming again and about how I want to live bigger, you know,
Mm.
how things like this help you to live bigger. And as you know, in November, I came up with this idea that I wanted to start writing not just about myself. I wanted to get outside of my own head.
Mm.
And I came up with this idea about typing poems on a typewriter.
Yes. Can you talk about your typewriter, please?
Well, here
Oh,
it is.
beautiful, beautiful.
It's a Corona from the 1920s.
Mm.
And I came up with this idea because I hadn't made a lot of art and I was going to be at an art show. And I wanted to do something different.
Mm.
So I cut up these little pieces of paper and people came up to my table at this craft show and they wrote notes. Look at these notes. This one says, Mom is always thinking about what she can do for others. This little girl wrote all these notes about her mother.
Wow.
And then she left me with a $5 bill because I charged $5 a poem. And I typed up a poem for her about her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I started clacking away and people would hear that clacking. And then somebody would bring their poem and say, look, she wrote me a poem. And then they'd come back and say, will you write me a poem?
Uh-huh.
And I wrote over 40 poems.
Wow.
And these are all the notes from all the requests. And then I started writing some of my very own poems on these sheets for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really good way to get out of my grief and move on to think about other people. I think one of the most entertaining things about the um the poems about from other people was that someone would come to me and say, uh, I'd like you to write a poem for my husband, David. And I would say, well, tell me about your husband. Mm-hmm. So this is John. He comes to me and he says, my husband, David, I've been married to him for 35 years. He has no hobbies. He plays only solitaire. Mm-hmm. He's witty and smart. He's a great cook. He makes me laugh. And then he says, can you write me a poem? I'm like, he has no hobbies. So
what'd you do?
Oh my gosh. I realize I'm starting to tell this story and now I have to go find the poem. Oh. Wait, it's nearby. I promise.
Yeah.
But the thing that was lucky is because I had to give these poems to the people after I wrote them. Mm-hmm. I remembered to take a picture of them before I gave them away.
Great idea. Yeah.
So I had them framed. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. In a little frame.
That's
and
beautiful.
So what I wrote about David, I entitled it David, and I said, David has wit. He makes John laugh, which is all that matters after 35 years. Mm. If he can still achieve this after all this time, he should win a medal. And did I mention his pork loin? Delish. So what if he plays solitaire on the computer all the time? At least we know where he is. So John came, picked up this gift poem for David, and was thrilled.
I imagine that must bring joy to people to make these tributes to loved ones, and you are showing the essence of who they are with these poems.
So
a great idea.
It was so much fun, It was so much fun. And so one other person that came, and I have one more poem if I have time, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we have 3 more minutes.
Okay. So this family came up to me and they told me about this guy named Sam who was studying to be a rabbi. And they said, Sam is just this really funny guy. He just so funny. I'm trying to find the notes, but I saved them here, and it was just like, Sam really likes to wiggle his hips, and Sam gives everybody funny nicknames, and they just went on and on about this guy, Sam. And they left. I sent them away. This is a great thing. I said, okay, go shopping at the craft show, and I'll text you when the poem's ready. So they leave, and I quickly get on my phone and I say, what does it require? What do you have to do to become a rabbi? Like, what do you have to study? Like, I didn't know what, besides the Torah, what else there was, right? So I looked this up on Google, and this is the poem I ended up writing about Sam. Sam, how is it that Sam has time to wiggle his hips, make up funny names for everyone like Wilhelmina and wife Fado, when he is so busy studying the Torah, the Talmud, the Mishnah, and learning Hebrew? While we enjoy his goofy demeanor, we are all worried that he will be too tired to rabbi, if that is in fact the verb for practicing his faith. So here is this guy, he's wiggling his hips and doing all these silly things. And I'm like, well, how's he going to have time to become a rabbi? He's so busy doing all these silly things. Well, Sam, it turns out, loved the poem. And
we are just about out of time.
Okay.
If you could just end with a closing remark.
Yes. I appreciate the time here, Cheryl. This has been a pleasure.
What an inspiration you are. Thank you so much for joining. And I'll stay tuned, and we'll stay tuned to all the art programs and poetry you are dealing with and giving out to community. Thank you so much, Catherine, and take care.
Thank you, Cheryl. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.